Awesome. Well, Brandy Vega, thank you so much for joining us on Fresh Courage with Jason Rogers. Really excited to have you here.
Thank you. I love talking to you. Just you're amazing people.
Oh man, yeah, you're too kind. So just to give a brief intro to the listeners, Brandy Vega is an entrepreneur, philanthropist, media personality, veteran of the U.S. military, and
Army, Hua,
and just an extraordinary person. And it's funny because we're sitting here in your studio, and before I launched the podcast, I thought, I really want to highlight people who demonstrate fresh courage in their life, who have done some extraordinary things, that have been able to get through some things and can ultimately inspire people to do more than we think we're capable of doing. And what better person than to highlight you, Brandy, just by knowing you the last several months and really getting to work with you. I'm just excited to share your story.
God, you're going to make me emotional. I really appreciate that. Sometimes you wonder if what you're doing matters or makes a difference, or, and especially the older you get, I think you look back and go, have I done what I should have done? Have I been bold, or where am I?
Right. Yeah. And we're always progressing, right? So let's jump right in here, Brandy. You have a pretty big foothold here in the Utah media community, but not only just Utah, but nationally as well. What got you into media, and what made you feel like you wanted to blaze that trail for yourself?
I remember I was about 10 years old, and I grew up, I had a single mom who worked a couple minimum wage jobs. There were days we were cold, days we were hungry. We didn't have much. I started working at a young age. And I remember when I was about 10 years old, looking at the screen and watching the news. And I saw the reporter up there, and she was pretty, and she was covering this story. And I thought, wow, that would be a really cool job. You get to meet new people. You get to tell stories. You're on TV. So from the time I was about 10 years old, I thought I wanted to do that. Then when I got into junior high, I started on the newspaper, and in high school, I did media, broadcast horrible commercials and did the morning announcements and everything. It was fun. I did the newspaper and just a bunch of different groups. And then I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. I still wanted to be a reporter, but I didn't know how I was going to go to college and pay for it. And my senior year, I got a phone call from a recruiter, which I was so naive. It's funny. I didn't know the difference between any of the military branches.
Right.
And so this guy calls me and he goes, what are you going to do with your life? I said, I want to be a reporter. Well, we have that in the military. No, I had no idea. Didn't grow up around the military. My grandfather fought in the war and was a war hero, but he died before I was born. I didn't really know anybody in the military. So long story short, I said, well, I'll have an appointment. I'll meet with you and see. I'm open-minded. And I didn't know how I was going to pay for college. They said, we'll pay for college and we'll get you the education. And for me, I always wanted the quickest path with least resistance. And that was maybe not the best choice. But I go to show up, and it was a Marine recruiter. And I drove around. I was lost. I'm 17 years old. I didn't know the difference. So I finally go running in the Army office. I'm like, I'm so sorry, I'm late. They said, what's your name? Sit down. And the Marines called me the next day, but 5 tests later and about 5 weeks later, I ended up joining the Army.
Holy
as
smokes.
a broadcast journalist and public affairs specialist. Graduated high school 6 months early and went to boot camp.
Awesome. Well, it was either serendipitous or the biggest mistake, but I think it couldn't be, right? Serving in the Army.
No, and if I would have been really lucky that day, I would have went into an Air Force recruiter. But, at least all the branches are great. I'm glad I got to do that.
Of course. So you then at 17 years old, graduate early, go into the Army. Are you going through boot camp and all that stuff?
Yeah. And for the really old people, if you remember Private Benjamin, that was me. I was just like, hey guys, I'm here. My hair was about the same length. They're like, okay, cupcake, we're going to smoke you. And I got smoked every day, all day. I've never done more push-ups in my entire life. It was the best experience. It was $1 million experience I wouldn't give you 2 cents for.
Oh, that's
I
awesome.
never want to do it again, but I'm really glad I did it. And within a year, I was, I got to interview the president of the United States. I was working with Don Rumsfeld and Colin Powell, and I got to work at the War College, and I was traveling all over. And then by the time I was 20 years old, I was reporting for Fox News.
Wow.
I was the youngest reporter at the Fox affiliate they'd ever had.
So that really was true. They said, well, we'll get you into media broadcast. We'll get you, on site. And you were able to do all those things.
Yeah. I mean, within a year, I learned TV, radio, and print journalism. It was so hard. Our school, I went to the Defense Information School in Baltimore, Maryland. And literally, if you missed half a day of school, you ran the risk of being recycled. It was a fire hose, and they were teaching us so much so fast that if you were sick for any reason, it was like, well, sorry, you didn't learn what we learned in that 30-minute block. You're going to have to start over and redo it all.
Wow.
So it was hard. I mean, we went to school from 8 in the morning till 5 or 6. We broke for dinner, and then I did homework till 10 o'clock every night.
My goodness.
It was all day. So when I got back and I was working full time and going to college full time, I was taking 22 credit hours. I was working a full-time job. I was like, this is nothing compared to the military.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, I got this. So then you served for 4 years?
I was in actually for 8.
8 years. Okay.
Yeah, Army Reserve. So ended up doing about 3 years active total with deployments to Kosovo.
Oh, wow.
Serbia, Croatia, that area. And then I worked in Alaska, and I worked on humanitarian missions all over the world.
Excellent. So you've seen the world, you've traveled, you've seen people in some of the most desolate places and conditions, and then come back to this place called Utah and then get a position at Fox News.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, how was that transition going from reporting in the military to then reporting everyday news for Fox? I
loved a lot of it, and I hated a lot of it. It was like, for me, as a broadcaster in the military and doing public affairs, we had to learn the do's and don'ts, what you say, and teaching at the War College. I'd be like, I'm briefing these world global leaders on what they should and shouldn't say to the media. And then on the media side, I'm trying to get them to say what I told them not to say.
Yep.
And you go back and forth, and it was really hard. And my first reporting job was actually in South Dakota, but I did end up working in Utah, and I worked around, and it was tricky. The media business, it's hard. And I actually ended up getting out because I wasn't willing to sensationalize at the level that was required of me. Interesting.
And I feel like, fast forward to today, and it's almost, dare I say, all sensationalized. Very little meat and potatoes of the facts of the news, and more so sensationalistic, shows and things of that nature.
It's tricky, and I want to be respectful to my friends and to my career, because I appreciate so much what true journalism and broadcasters do. It's a tough world, and you're not very appreciated, and you show up on people's worst days of their lives.
Right.
That's what I did most of my career. Is I was there for the moment that somebody died, somebody was in a horrific crash, somebody got murdered, their house burned down, they're indicted, whatever it was. I was there 90% of my career on people's absolute worst days. Oh. And to think that doesn't cause you PTSD, when I'm the first one on a murder suicide, and I'm sitting there with 3 little kids who just lost their mom and their dad before Child Protective Services and the police. I mean, it was hard. It was really hard.
I can't even imagine. And I can imagine that seeing some of those things prompted you to really think about the purposeful work that you're doing today. And you started Good Deed Revolution back in 2015, and then now Promise to Live. And I mean, what important work that is.
Jason, I think God gives us experiences in our lives. One of the thoughts I had, I got to write a book, and as I was going through it and thinking, I had 2 really clear thoughts. One is, when you notice. When you know what it's like to be hungry, you notice those are hungry. When you know what it's like to be lonely or sad or to struggle, you notice those who struggle. And you have empathy in a way that you wouldn't have had any other way. When you notice. Yep. The other thing that I really thought of is, life is what's given, opportunity is what's taken. And I've seen that all over throughout the course of my career. And doing foster care, I adopted a little baby who was born with drugs in his system and had a horrible opportunity there. And people all over the world in war-torn regions, you don't get to determine where you're born, who your parents are, whether or not you have affluence or wealth or food. You don't get to determine any of that. But every day, every one of us gets to wake up with an opportunity. And we get to go out, and there is a lot of opportunity to take that. And I had to make it myself. How else was I going to go to college,
right,
and get my education and work in my career? So I think that, I hope people will think about that, because you can use things as a crutch, or you can use it just to move you through and say, okay, I have opportunities, and finding good mentors and stuff. So sharing this, I think, is important.
Absolutely. My background, my mother's from El Salvador. My grandmother raised 7 children on her own. My grandfather left the family after my grandma had her 7th child. And so I understand what it's like to live in a home listening to stories about not having food, not having enough, for that day. And my grandmother was a pioneer and came to this country with hopes and dreams and made the best of them. And my mom the same way. When my mom turned 18, then my grandma went back to El Salvador, took care of the rest of the kids while my mom took her job in LA, sent the money back. And so these are the stories that they really propel us to do what we're going to do in our life, because you've seen what it's like to watch somebody who's hungry, right? I've having those stories told to me, and then going back to my mother's home country of El Salvador, and then just seeing the difference there. I love my family members that are there, and we miss them dearly, and we go and visit as much as we're able. But how blessed we are to recognize having been born in the conditions that we were born in, and then we ask ourselves, what are we going to do about it, right? And so let's shift gears a little bit, Brandy, and share with us what you've done with Promise to Live. What is Promise to Live about, and what are you doing to really raise awareness for suicide prevention?
Thank you for asking that. And before I answer, I just want to commend you because of the sacrifice of your grandmother and the sacrifice of your mom and what you've gone on to build. You didn't waste that. You took that and you said, okay, thank you for the opportunity, and you've excelled. And I've watched you too. I've watched you give back to the community. I've watched you give back to your family and to your kids, and you've created opportunities and all of that stuff. So I can just imagine how proud your mom and your grandmother are, because again, when you know, you notice.
Yeah.
But if you do it right, you make a difference, and you change the lives of not just yourself and your family, but those around you, and set a good example. So thank you for that.
No, thank you.
Promise to Live. I actually, again, you go through situations in life that you never think you're going to go through. And sometimes you question it and go, well, why me, God? Why am I going through this? I almost lost my child to suicide, not once, but twice. And the first time at just 12 years old. And I didn't talk about it because I was so ashamed. The stigma, I thought everybody's going to judge me. I'm a working mom. I'm doing all this stuff. I must be so horrible. They're going to think that my own child would rather be dead. Just everything. It was too hard to talk about. So we carried that dirty secret for almost 2 years, and then it happened again. And the second time, I had been volunteering at the hospital for 7 years, doing Nobody Dies Alone in spiritual care. I had sat with a lot of families and a lot of individuals, but when it's your own child, it's different. And as I sat there, I had a breakdown on my personal social media, and I just said, I need help. I don't know what to do. I'm not sure if my child's going to live or die, but if she lives, I need help. And that video went viral. We had 12,000 views on it overnight. I had hundreds of messages. And I just thought, okay, what am I supposed to do with this? And I was praying to God, please save my child. And I got a very strong message. And it doesn't matter what religion or what belief you had, but I had a very strong impression that said, I'll give you a second chance, but there will not be a third. What will you do? And I thought, I'll do anything that's required of me. I will do anything to have my child back. And shortly after, she woke up and she didn't have long-term disabilities or effects. And I said, are you glad you're alive, or do you wish you would have died? And she said, Mom, I didn't really want to die. It was just too late. And that crushed me.
Yeah.
Because shortly after, I went to my friend's son's funeral, who was just 16. And I thought, nobody really wants to die. They just want to kill what's hurting them. And
so true.
And again, when you notice, like now that I've been through this, I could see things and people were reaching out to me, and I became a safe space because I shared on social media. Now people thought they could talk to me and start these conversations.
Right.
And when you start talking, you stop stigma. And so I reached out to all the other nonprofits in this space. I said, how can I help you guys? I have a video production company. I've been a producer for 25 plus years. I have a nonprofit. What do you need? I'll do anything. And I soon discovered that, while they were doing great things, many people didn't know about them, and all this stuff was happening. Well, and my friends at NBC, because of my career in the media, my friends at NBC reached out after that video went viral the next day, and they said, will you share your story on the news? I said, no way. Too painful, too personal, too private.
Right.
It's not going to happen. I don't want to talk about this, period. I'm not proud of it. I'm ashamed. It's embarrassing. It hurts. It's painful.
You felt all the feelings that most people feel right after that kind of an event.
Yeah. Nobody wants to talk about the worst moments of their
Yeah.
life. Hey, tell me about your greatest pain.
Yeah, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah, that sounds like a fun thing to do. Anything but that. And but then I had that message, and I said I would do anything. And so 2 weeks later, my phone rang again, and it was people at NBC, and they said, this is a huge problem. Nobody's willing to talk about it. Will you please reconsider? And I thought, if I'm terrified,
Yep.
me, Army, I've served my country. I've done hard things. I've been to boot camp. I was on TV forever.
Right.
I did all these things. If I'm terrified to go on camera and talk about this, what does a normal person feel like? And if not me, who? Everybody says somebody should do something, but nobody wants to be the somebody.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, well, I made a promise, and my word means everything. And is this a test? So I reluctantly did the interview, and I said this, and I say it every time I get an opportunity. If you're listening or watching right now, stop what you're doing and go ask your child, your spouse, your parents, your coworkers, your loved one, whoever it is, are you feeling suicidal? Don't beat around the bush. Honest questions get honest answers. And so I sent this during the interview, and shortly after, I got a message from a dad. And he said, you just saved my daughter's life.
Wow.
I said, what do you mean? He said, I watched you on the news. When you said stop and go check, I stopped. I went to go check. And when I got in my daughter's room, she had already written her note. She was in the process of trying to kill herself. We're at the hospital. Thank you.
Wow.
That hit hard. That hit deep.
Oh, yeah.
And shortly after, I got another message from a family, and they said, hey, thanks for sharing your story and being so vulnerable, which again was excruciatingly painful for me.
Sure.
They said, we talked to our son, and he confessed he had a plan to kill himself this weekend. We're getting him help. So that kind of has led us to where we are, right? Like, you can know things, but if you do nothing with it, what's the point of pain if there is no purpose?
Absolutely. And it's such a, you said it best, there's such a stigma. Nobody wants to talk about it. It's really interesting because I don't really even know how I got to the place to where now I've been talking about this for the last several months, right? And it happened because it always happens because somebody has an event or some kind of a triggering moment in their life that happens to them, and then they get down the slippery slope and they don't know where to go. They don't know of the resources. The stigma's there. They don't want to talk about it. And so I hit a pretty rock bottom place in my own personal life and mental health earlier this year, at the end of last year. And I had never been that guy to ever be depressed or feel, those kinds of feelings before. quite honestly, when I heard the term mental health, or, I'm struggling with my
That's
mental health.
That's for people who are weak. I'm strong.
I did. I thought, you know what? I kind of cringed. I was like, mental health, like what? You suck it up. Come on.
Yeah.
Like, what's the deal? How could it be so bad? Until it happens to you.
Right.
Until it happens to you. And then what are you going to do about it?
Right.
Right?
Right.
And so with you having formed Promise to Live, I actually, with a couple of guys here in Utah, just through LinkedIn, ended up connecting with them, went to a men's retreat, and we were like, wow, we want this feeling of brotherhood to last more than just this weekend.
Right.
How do we get that to last? And then John Moore had a brilliant idea with Justin Bray, and they invited me to be a part of Here Brotherhood, which within this year has just blown up over primarily LinkedIn, because the Surgeon General of the United States declared there is an epidemic of loneliness happening in this country, and quite frankly, globally.
Right.
And once we started sharing our stories, all I did was share my story on LinkedIn as an entrepreneur and as a dad, and the struggles that I've been going through. And so many people opened up and they're connecting. Same with Justin, same with John. And that's how we've grown this message of Here Brotherhood. And with Promise to Live, people are starting to really open up their mind to, man, there's other people out there that have struggled with their mental health, and we need to band together, and we need to help each other so that we don't get to the end of the rope.
Yeah. Well, statistically speaking, every 40 seconds, somebody dies by suicide. That's 800,000 people a year. It's a significant problem, and it's only been exacerbated by the pandemic. And you're right, the Surgeon General did release a report about loneliness and also about the epidemic of suicide, especially amongst our youth. Just since 2010, the suicide rate has gone up 71% for kids 10 to 17.
Unreal.
It blows my mind. And you look at it and you go, okay, well, what's changed? Well, our connection. We're not connecting. We're more connected but disconnected through social media and through our smartphones and just different things. So what Promise to Live is, what we've asked everybody, I said, okay, how do we come together in a meaningful way? Da Vinci said it best. He says, I've been impressed with the urgency of doing. Knowing is not enough. We must be willing to do. Right. Being willing is not enough. Like, we must be doing it. Right. I kind of butchered his quote, but essentially it's like we have to be doers. We all know there's a problem. We all say we're going to do something, but what are we actually doing? And even just having that conversation like you guys have had with Here Brotherhood and with what we've done with Promise to Live, when you share, when you open up, you do become a safe place. Yep. And it starts conversations. Starting conversations stops the stigma. Stopping the stigma saves lives. I'm on the Grand Challenge Committee. This is a global Grand Challenge. There's, I think, 17 countries involved, and they all got together and they said, what's the biggest problem plaguing the planet? It's mental health, suicide, addiction, and I'll throw in trauma. I don't know if they said that or not, but I believe that is. And they said, well, how do we fix that? Well, we need to stop the stigma. Well, how do we stop the stigma? I think it starts right here with these conversations, but with Promise to Live, we ask everybody, whether or not you're personally struggling right now, doesn't matter, because this is the one thing that impacts us all, directly or indirectly. I promise you, either you're going to feel it or somebody you love is going to feel it. Right. So we say, make a promise ahead of time that if you ever find yourself in a dark place, that you'll reach out to someone, anyone, a friend, a family member, a trusted resource like NAMI, NAMI.org, or AFSP.org, or Live On, or Jed, or Trevor. There's amazing groups out there doing incredible work. The problem is most people don't know they exist, and then it's too late by the time they need them. So we say reach out to a trusted resource or call or text 988. 988's been out a year and a half, and still only 18% of people know about it. So we want people to know 988 is a 911 for mental health. You can reach out to that. Our goal is, there's generic studies out there that say if you make a promise ahead of time, you're 60 to 80% more likely to keep it. Because sometimes we don't love ourselves enough to keep our word. Right. But if I tell you I'm going to meet you at the gym, I'm probably going to go to the gym, where if I just had told myself, I might sleep through it.
Well, there's power in accountability, right?
Yeah. So having that accountability, and we're working with a group to do a study on what is the power of a promise. I sure as heck wouldn't be doing this work if I didn't promise God to do it, because it's been one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life for the last 2.5 years, putting myself on the line, and no good deed sort of goes unpunished. You know, there's always going to be people who say, oh, Brandy wants attention. I guarantee I would much prefer attention for anything else than suicide prevention and mental health.
Right.
And dealing with this, because it's a wound. And the hard part about it is, for me, I do it because I'm one of the lucky ones. I got a second chance.
Yeah.
My kid is still here today, and we just celebrated his 17th birthday. That means everything to me, because one of the people that I work with lost her father and her son. She doesn't get that same second chance. And every time we talk about it, it's like a wound. And we come and we just peel the scab off. And I peel it off every event I do and every talk we do, because you have to address it and you have to face the demons, right? And so for her, she's done it for over 4 years, and she finally just said, you know, I've done my part. I can't keep doing this because it's too painful. It's so important, and people need to do it, and we do need to talk about it. We have to normalize the conversations, because these are honest conversations that will save lives.
Yep.
But it's not fun. Yeah. I don't get excited to come and share my pain with you.
Yeah.
But I do it because if by sharing we can save lives and make a difference, then now my pain has meaning. It has purpose, and it hasn't just been in vain.
Right. Wow, that's powerful. And once we really take those experiences that we have and we can turn them towards a positive energy, and then we could really affect and bless the lives of other people. I mean, isn't that really what it's all about? You know, why else do we go through challenges? Why else do we go through pain? Not just for ourselves, right? But so that we can help other people to get through theirs.
Yeah.
And push through it.
And that's been one of the hardest things, Jason, as I go through. It's like, okay, who else could do this? I mean, I had to have the purpose behind it. I had to have my why, because so many times last year I found myself, and I'm not a crier, but I'm at home and I'm just breaking down. I'm like, why am I even doing this?
Yeah.
And my husband says, you know why you're doing it.
Yeah.
She's in the other room.
Yeah.
Okay, I know my why. But I also had to have the profession. Part of what we're doing is we're providing hope, help, healing, and resources through media and online platforms so people choose to live. We're gathering all the incredible groups out there doing the work, like Here Brotherhood, like I Love You Bro, like NAMI and AFSP and Live On and JED and all the groups that we've mentioned. And we're putting them in a place that's easy to find, because when you're in crisis, you don't know where to go. You don't know where to turn. You're just trying to breathe through the moment. And I remember those days in the hospital thinking, what do I do?
Right.
And I knew people had been through it, but I didn't know who. And to come to them and look for it. So my mission now is to alleviate that burden and say, okay, I hope you don't ever get to this point. But if you do, here's pre-crisis, here's crisis, here's post-crisis. There is help. There is support. There is a community. And the number one thing is to start talking about it.
Absolutely. I mean, just talking now, I mean, I've known that family is really important to you, but I mean, when family is the driving force to what you do professionally, that's where there's some firepower behind it. How do you, as an entrepreneur, as a wife, as a mom, how do you balance those things, especially trying to balance it with working within a topic that's really heavy?
Yeah.
How do you do that?
It's been hard because my video production, Vega Media, has kind of been the vehicle. Like the first year, I just paid for everything out of pocket. It was $150,000. I was like, well, I don't know how I'm doing this or what. I'm not a multimillionaire. I'm not self-made. But it was worth it to me. I was like, I will pay any price that I need to pay it forward and save lives. And thankfully, I think I think God provides.
Yeah.
And so, at the end of that time, we ended up raising about $150,000 and it covered it. I have to prioritize. And one of the biggest things as a working mom throughout my career was quality over quantity. I might not have the amount of time other people have, but I try to make every moment I have count.
Right.
So I try to give people quality time because I just don't have the quantity. And working in Nobody Dies Alone, I sat with a lot of people on their final breaths, and some of them were multimillionaires. I sat with the founder of a big, huge store. I sat with a renowned heart surgeon, and they were alone as they were dying.
Oh,
and they're sitting there with me, a stranger. And I sat with people who experienced homelessness and different avenues. But what I discovered is one thing that Elder Bednar said during Silicon Slopes. It's a quote from Elder Faust.
Mm-hmm.
So they had said, when you can't do what you've always done, you do what really matters. And I think that's what I've tried to do in my life. You sometimes have to triage or prioritize and say, okay, what really
what matters most?
Yeah, what do I care about? If my life is over today, and each of our lives could be over today.
Yeah.
You might have an aneurysm. You might have a car accident. You don't know what's going to happen. So I try to look at my life and say, did I live up to my potential today? Did I accomplish the mission I wanted to accomplish? Did I leave people in a state better than I found them? Does everyone know I love them? Do you know what I stand for?
Yeah.
That's what I try to do every day, because you don't know when it's your last day. And what I also found as I sat there and held people's hands and heard their final words and thoughts, it's very profound. You regret the things you don't do more than the things you do. And so I want to live my life with no regrets.
Yep.
I want to live each day with meaning and purpose and potential. I want to leave a legacy. And so that's how I think about things. Yeah, we all have to pay the bills, because if we didn't, life would be a different story.
Right.
And people say, okay, if you knew you were going to die, in a week, what would you do? Well, I was like, I'd eat Cheesecake Factory every day and hang out with family and friends. But
yeah.
I mean, you almost have to do it in a responsible manner.
No doubt. I mean, it's interesting. The last several weeks, we've traveled back home to, I say home to San Diego. Home is here now, but my hometown of San Diego, a couple times. One for a memorial service for my wife's grandmother, and then another memorial service for a dear friend of ours. And when you go to these memorial services of people who have lived full lives, mm-hmm. and my wife's grandmother, for instance, she was always in the service of other people. And it really got me thinking about, what does God want us to do? What does he want us to do? And he tells us, love one another.
Right.
Love one another. If we love one another, there's a quote in our, there's a frame in our house from Mother Teresa that says, if you want to change the world, go home and love your family. Mm-hmm. And I love that, because as we focus on our families, we love one another, we will be shining lights to everyone else around us. And the work that we do with your brotherhood, with Promise to Live, and just the work that we do in general as everyday people to pay the bills, to support our family. Mm-hmm. When we do it with purpose, we do it with a smile, and then we don't forget the most important things. Like Elder Bednar said, if you don't know what to do, do what matters most, right?
Yeah. And
what matters most are those things of an eternal nature, eternal perspective, right? And so, I'm so grateful for you. I'm grateful for the work that you're doing. I'm grateful that you've gone into the uncomfortable, right? You've demonstrated the fresh courage that we're really trying to highlight. I remember very, very specifically, it was kind of like a moment you shared with us here today where, I feel like God spoke to me through a song, and it's an LDS hymn, and it's Come, Come Ye Saints, and we sing it often. And it was at a general conference probably 10 years ago. And I just remember feeling kind of low in life, and the words, "Gird up your loins, fresh courage take. Our God will never us forsake." When I heard those words, they just brought such peace to my heart. And I knew that at some point in my life, I wanted to share stories of fresh courage. And so I feel like we've really done that today, Brandy. And thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for doing what you do. And thank you for being a light amongst a lot of darkness here in the world.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. And as you said that, if I might have a final thought, I was thinking about the no success outside the home can compensate for failure within the home. So everything we do, I think, if we put our faith and our family first, the rest of it falls into place. And then with work, as I've moved forward and really built, I think I call myself an up-and-comer. I've surrounded myself with incredible people and mentors over the last 5 years. And I think that other quote, I love quotes, is people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And going into life and relationships, I've started to do things differently. You know, before when I would meet people, I would be like, oh, hey, you know, what do you do?
Yep.
And now it's like, well, what brings you happiness?
Or who are you?
Right? Who are you? Like, where do you find hope? What is your purpose? And I had an opportunity at a meeting the other day to sit down, and somebody asked me something like that. And I was able to share a promise to live. And as I went into conversation with this person, I discovered that he had lost his son to suicide. And he ended up sharing his story with us on our broadcast. And I would encourage people to take a look at that at promise2live.org. His name's Tim Paget, and he's now going to be a member of our board, but runs a very successful company. And mental health and suicide don't discriminate. Young, old, rich, poor, black, white. It's something out there for everyone. And we have to take preventative measures, just like we do with anything, to get our annual checkup and to check in on one another. In the military, we would say, check your buddy's foxhole. Now I'd say send a text. Yep. If somebody crosses your mind, if you just pause right now, just pause for a few seconds and think, who should I reach out to today? Who could use a word of encouragement? Is there someone that needs something from me? Write down the first 2 or 3 people that come to mind and then reach out to them. I think that intuition and promptings and inspiration, I get to do a devotional later today and share a story. A couple of weeks I left work. A meeting canceled on me. It made me sad. I felt unimportant. I just thought, well, that stinks. This person doesn't view me as a priority. And so I left work at a different time. And when I got to my exit, there was a car stopped in front of me that was taking too long. And I was like, okay, car, you know, go. And I thought about honking at him. And as I went to honk, I was prompted, don't honk at him, just drive around. And as I drove around with my windows up and their windows up, I thought I heard crying. And I was like, are they crying? I don't know. I just want to get home to my family. I turn the corner, I start to drive. And the prompting was so strong, stop and see, check on him. And I kept going. And pretty soon they pulled out behind me and it was like, slow down, you have to stop, you have to talk to him. That's awkward. That's uncomfortable. How do you, sometimes we have to follow these impressions and promptings and whatever you want to call it, spiritual calls to action. And so finally I pulled over and I flagged these people down. And they pulled over, surprisingly. And as they got next to me and we rolled down the window, I could see that everybody in the car was crying, sobbing, wailing. It was shocking to me. And I just said, are you guys okay? And they said, no, our daughter died and we don't know how to deal with it. And I said, I'm so sorry. What can I do to help? And the mom said, I could use a hug. And so on the side of the street, I got out of my car and I hugged her from mother to mother. Wow. And then we had them come to our house. And then we spent 3 hours of time with them, letting them know that they're loved, that they can do hard things, that God's aware of them. And I think as we discuss this, whether in business or our personal lives, and when you talk about taking courage, sometimes courage is uncomfortable. Yeah. Sometimes it's hard to act on that, and sometimes you question it. But I promise you that if you act on that, if you listen and if you take courage with every moment to answer that call, to send the text, to check on the people, to pull over, to just say, are you okay? You're going to bless lives.
Absolutely.
And it's not just your own. It'll be the people next to you.
Ah, I love that. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Brandy. Let's all take the promise to live. Let's go to www.promise2live.org. Thank you so much, Brandy.
I appreciate you. Keep up the good work.
Likewise.